Hi, my name's Pat. I'm a grateful member of GreySheeters Anonymous. I have 17 years of back-to-back GreySheet abstinence, 2006, December 15th. I weigh and measure 3 meals a day from the GreySheet. I write it down. I commit it to my sponsor, to another qualified GreySheet person. I don't eat no matter what, and abstinence is the most important thing. And I pray a lot, and I drink a lot of water. So let's see. I was born in New York City in 1945, just before the end of the Second World War. My mother was African-American and my father was Hungarian. And they met, my mother helped to integrate the Pentagon. And in order to get the job, she needed a reference. And she told me that all her friends laughed at her because they said nobody was going to hire a Black secretary. And so my mother was very tenacious. She went to a local law firm in the Bronx. It was actually Upper Manhattan. It was actually in Harlem. And worked for them for free to get this reference. And that's where she met my father. He'd been married once before and had a little girl. In those days, Black and white citizens could not marry each other in New York City. And so they had to go to Connecticut to get married. So so my early childhood story was about race, violence, people not following the rules, people arguing with each other as to what was correct and what was not correct. I was safe as long as I was in this protected atmosphere with my parents, who were all like-minded. I was sent to a school, it was a humanist school, and we were also pacifists. So that was, it created a lot of difficulties once I left that atmosphere. When my parents separated, I went to the local public school, which had not been integrated at that point. And the whole Upper West Side of New York was in an uproar. Who were all these Black students coming into our school? The whole place was going to collapse. It was going to be terrible. And then on top of that, the Eastern European Jewish immigrants came flooding into New York City from the war. And they were all coming to public school as well. So I could speak English really well, and obviously, and so I became, like a mentor for lots of young girls that were my age. They'd either been born in the concentration camp, or they had come from the concentration camp, or they were displaced, and we all ended up in school together. Along with those kids were the Catholic and Protestant children whose parents had married. So, in those days, if you came from Ireland, you didn't marry a Protestant person if you were a Catholic. So there were a lot of, so this is my whole little band of merry friends. My other friend, Jerry, who was Irish, but from Protestant and Catholic parents, they had to flee the Bronx because their parents had gotten married. So the war changed a lot. There were a lot of people that normally wouldn't mix. So I get a lot from the AA literature, which we use here in the GreySheet. It talks about, we had to drink because we won a peace or lost the war. We had to drink. You can put in your eat because things didn't turn out one way or another. And I understand when they say that it's possible for us to all get together. I know what that's like. So I took to the 12 steps on a natural basis. The problem is that I don't get along with everybody. I mean, it's fine to say that. And when you're with people that think the way you do, that are against the draft, that thinks and the taxes and the this and the that, everything's fine. But when I came into 12-step recovery, the doors open for everybody. It doesn't say, who did you vote for? What political party are you a member of? Do you think that mini skirts are okay for girls that are 14? So suddenly I'm now faced with, am I actually a humanist, or am I just, like other people, agree with the people that agree with me? So I was in a violent marriage and had been for many years. We worked together on various, political situations. My mother was a very violent woman, lots of mood swings. And I remember when I went to a therapist, she suggested that I go to Overeaters Anonymous because I would hear my childhood story, force feeding, laxatives, locked up in rooms for days at a time. And I thought, what in the world does that have to do with Overeaters Anonymous? I did not have a weight problem. If anything, I had an underweight problem. I wanted to be well endowed, like my other girlfriends, who were getting boyfriends and running around. And I was very skinny and flat chested. And I had a lot of teeth and a lot of mouth. And that was not actually what was popular, and I always like to say, I want to be, whatever it is I want to be, it's what I see. That's what I want. I remember I wanted a little dog because the people in the building next door, all the kids had dogs, that kind of thing. They also had two parents, and I'm a very good house guest. I'm very polite. And I say all the right things to your parents, and then I'll help you steal money from your father's wallet. So that's kind of how I am. Now, I was like that with friends of mine and food. Everybody in the 60s started to be on a diet. Everybody was, suddenly being skinny was the thing. And, that's what people wanted as an image. And so not having much money, we would go to lunch. I went to school in the middle of Broadway and 46th Street, so we were allowed to go out for lunch. There were a lot of draconian rules in the public school system. You couldn't go out, you couldn't do this. Well, we managed to go out every day and became chain smokers. Certainly me, by the time I was 14, I was a chain smoker. You couldn't really get alcohol because you had to be a certain age to buy it in a liquor store, or to get into any of the bars and clubs. So we all had fake ID. And I would borrow food from everybody. The girls that are on diets would order all this food. And then they said, well, we'll split it with you, Pat. So I was in collusion with a bunch of binge buddies. So I was like the sidekick. If you're on a diet and you want to order a large piece of sweet carbohydrates, and you shouldn't have it, you can give half of it to Pat, and that'll feel like you didn't do that. And I remember sitting on the floor with a friend of mine trying to get her into these Levi's. I was sitting on her face, and we put them up her legs, and then we were yanking on the zipper to try to close it. I thought that was okay because I was still wearing kids' clothes because I was so tiny. And, knee socks and pleated skirts were definitely not happening. And I just felt very left out. Nobody actually said, the racial people and the religious people said, you don't belong here. But my running buddies never said that. So just to sort of separate those two things, there was a lot of places that I couldn't go in because of who I was. Racially and religiously, but this merry band of people, nobody said that, but I thought that. I then I auditioned for a ballet school, and I got into the ballet school. There were no ballerinas of color then. There was one Maria Tallchief. She was an indigenous woman, and she was also short like me. So this was, all of a sudden, all these things about being too short. It's okay to be tall and thin, but if you're short and thin, it's not working so well. So I got the audition, and it was very, my life was just scary. My mother was unpredictable. The housekeeper was like, I could do anything I wanted as long as I got back by 5:30 when my mother came home from work. And my mother was totally committed to this government job. She fought for it. She was a heroine in her group. And so I was sort of left alone with various people. So now it was an asset being thin. And I didn't know anything about throwing up. And, there was a lot of bulimic stuff going on. But my friend came over one day and she had these black pills. And the doctor had given her black beauties because she was an overweight, chubby little girl. And by that time, I discovered amphetamines. There was a lot of liquid methadone around in New York. You could only get it from a doctor, but I had a lot of rich friends that had a lot of doctors that would give you prescriptions for everything. And I just loved having speed. I wasn't self-conscious. I wasn't nervous. You could ask me who are you and where's your mother? And I would just give you some fabulous answer and tell you to go fuck yourself. I like that part. I had courage. Now, in terms of the food, there was sugar and alcohol in everything. I was given hot toddies to go to sleep. You weren't given sugar directly because there wasn't that much of it available, but there was a big bag of yellow sugar on the table in this woman's house, this woman that looked after me. And we put it on everything. We put it on breakfast cereal. We put it on, what do you want? Proteins, let's just say proteins. We mixed it in everything, in drinks, in lemon drinks. There was also something, it was called rock candy, and it was just cubes of sugar strung together on a string. And it was just pure sugar. You could just have that. So I remember that warm feeling. And then I was kind of sleepy and I wasn't so worried. And, things were going to be okay. And I think my grandmother was I guess you could call it a depression. I mean, she never spoke. And we sat in the kitchen and she cooked and we listened to soap cereals on the radio, Stella Dallas and My Gal Sunday. And I just love that. I still do that now. You could buy a bag. I can't even tell you. The bag was about this big, full of pieces of sugar, wrappers, like candy, for a penny. So I was able to steal a penny and go down to the store. And my grandmother put me on the fire escape with this big bag of candy. And I had comic books and I would just sit there all day and I would eat them all. I would just eat them all, one after the other. Didn't seem to be, there was no hand-mouth sense. The body and the mind were two separate places. And then the feelings, well, who knew what they were? I want to remember that I ate to get over the chemical problems of eating. The carbs and the sugar. And my mother ate nothing. She was tiny like me. She weighed about 82 pounds. And she had a strong left hook. So she would sit me down and make me eat this dinner. And she would just sit there and drink tea. And it was a big thing about you have to finish everything on the plate. Thank you. Is that 1 minute to 15? Okay. You had to eat everything. People were starving. You were ungrateful. You had to finish. So I have a lot of weird stuff stuck in my head. I did a lot of very positive things that had negative effects. I did them for health reasons. I became a fruitarian because, the food was poison. When I went away to various meditation retreats, everything had honey on it. If it was if it was a natural product, it was okay. So I came into GreySheet straight from the health food store. I would buy these candy bars that had pictures of endangered species on them. And I didn't know that it was just sugar. It didn't look like, the bags and boxes on the outside world. And if it was brown, it was definitely healthy. So I had and then there was a long time in the early 70s, there was a book that came out called The Sugar Blues. And my friend and I were pregnant at the time and very concerned about health, and these babies. Meanwhile, I'm snorting heroin, I'm eating, raw meat, where, all these things, I say all that because all these things that I was doing were all supposed to be helpful. I remember a friend of mine said, oh, when you breastfeed the baby, you just take a little snort of heroin and then they'll go right to sleep. And I remember being given whiskey, in my bottle to put me to sleep. So, we're moving along in the evolutionary chain of this disease. So now I'm 14 years sober. I'm back living with my husband in London. I'm working on a project. I'm a battered wife, and I'm working on a project about battered women. And so there we are, the dichotomy, of the compulsive eater. And the reason it's compulsive is because there's a phenomenon of craving. So I can tell you the whole story and leave that very important part out, which is if you pick up the first bite, it sets off a chemical reaction. Now, I was an IV heroin addict who believed that I was not addicted to heroin. I believed that the doctor put me on the heroin list in England because I needed it. Not because I was physically addicted. So, it kind of, I don't know, whatever it is that you feel and understand about the gray sheet, grab onto that and my mantra is don't put it in your mouth. If you're in doubt, leave it out. Get numbers of people that are going to answer the phone. I have my shopping person. Every time I pick up the phone, she's, hi there. And now we just have a joke. I call her, I'm in the supermarket, and she just says no. And so that's our whole relationship for the last 10 years. No, but I need that to break the chain. I can't break the obsession with my thinking alone. It just doesn't work. So now I'm writing this thing about this battered woman. I'm drinking black coffee all day long. And I'm in a situation, it's like anyway, I'm in a private club where I have this little room and they just bring me whatever I want. So they just bring me carbohydrates and, we're back to having candy like I was when I was a kid. The idea was just keep her working, give her, and I met one of the people working on the project after I came into GreySheet. He said, oh yeah, the director said, just give her what she wants, right? Wherever you have to go in the city, get it and give it to her. So, and again, because of all this health food stuff, there were very exotic things. There was Dutch this and Chinese that. And so then I'm having these anxiety attacks and I'm thinking, I don't know what this is. I'm 14 years sober. I started to cry. Oh, and I went back to eating pure sugar. In England, in the chemist, the drugstore, you can buy things in candy wrappers that are just pure glucose. It's doesn't have little cartoons on it or anything. It's just glucose. And I was always given glucose when I had asthma attacks because that was, the whole idea was to open up the lungs, the heart. And so IVs of glucose, and I'm having these panic attacks. And then they put me on these beta blockers to stop my heart from beating so fast. And I'm still eating all this sugar and I start crying and I can't stop. I don't know what's going on. So my friend takes me down to a mystic down in, down on the coast of England. There was another book called Eat Right for Your Blood Type. And that was a book going around then. So if you were this blood type, these are the foods you should eat. So we get down there and she chants over me and pricks my finger. And then we had to laugh because my blood type turned out to be B positive. And, I just couldn't stop crying. I just, I would be in my husband's car. I was crying on the street corner. I was crying in AA meetings. Then friend said, go see this Chinese herbalist. So I go see the Chinese herbalist and, he does that thing where you hold minerals in your hand and, your arm is weak. It's a homeopathic thing, so we did all those tests and then he gave me a list of things that I shouldn't eat because he said they have high fructose. So there was a whole list of fruits, all of which I ate all the time. And then there was a whole list of carbohydrates. I didn't know that all of the carbohydrate loading I was doing is it turns into alcohol in your system. You know, the body is like a still. So if you put these things in, the body, like a still, manufactures the sugar, and then you're screwed. So I was in an AA meeting. My mother had just died, and I was talking about, I'm going to do just what she did. I'm just going to eat this kind of candy, and I'm going to drink black coffee. And, you know, because I had experience in sharing in meetings, you know, I just said it. I didn't think it was anything in particular. And somebody came up to me and said, Pat, you're drunk on food. And I thought, what? When she put those two words together, I suddenly realized what was happening. She said, I know what's happening to you. I go to something called the GreySheet. You can come with me if you want to. And, you know, I've lived in Manhattan my whole life. We start walking across Central Park. I know every inch of that park. I used to hide there. I had sex there. I grew up there. You know, I know every place. I just know the geography. I'm following her across the park, and I look up and I don't know where I am. I don't know where I am. I'd lost, you know, this whole, so I literally held on to her hand. We arrived at the GreySheet meeting down at Cabrini Hospital. And there was a friend of mine from high school. And again, a connection, sitting in the coffee shop with no money, eating other people's sweets and food. You know, I was just so clear. So I did do 90 meetings in 90 days. I was very scared. We went to the supermarket, and I couldn't figure out what the different green vegetables were. You know, we went to Zabar's, so, you know, they're all labeled this and that. And I remember I'd gone to a farmer's market when I was a young mother, you know, with my son on my hip. And I picked up a bushel of green stuff, and I said, what is this? And the woman said to me, you don't know what that is? I mean, it was so shaming that I had no idea whatever it was. So now I'm in, and I was hiding frozen carbohydrate containers in the people's garbage cans downstairs. I would go out the back door of the apartment, go down 2 flights of stairs, and dump the empty containers, because my son had called his father and said, there's something wrong with mom. All she's doing is eating frozen carbohydrates. So he called me and said, well, what the hell is going on there? And I told him to mind his own effing business. And when I got downstairs that day with my little secret bag of frozen carbohydrates, because now I can't let my son know that I'm eating, I lifted up the lid from the can, and I dumped the cartons in, and I realized that I used to do that with the bottles. I would creep downstairs and try to hide the empties. And I thought, no, this can't be happening to me. This can't be happening to me. I don't know what's going on. So I continued to go to the meetings. There was a woman speaking at Soldiers and Sailors, and I was told to ask her to be my sponsor. The GreySheet was so complicated, I couldn't figure it out. You know, she had crossed this out and put that on, and ounces and pounds. But the main thing was, I was scared I was going to lie. I was scared that if I got home and I had the scale, well, first of all, I can't figure it out because everything starts to go blurry. And then the other thing was that I was going to lie. I was not going to be able to do it. And somebody reminded me that there's going to come a time in your recovery when there's nobody there, and it's just you and your higher power, and you're just going to have to rely on that. So I did, and I kept calling her in the wrong time, and she kept hanging the phone up on me. Just so, you know, I had to get a different sponsor, but I was determined. And I'll just close with this. It was not a straight ahead trajectory. I kept making technical mistakes and thinking, well, why do I have to go back? I ate my lunch instead of my dinner because they were both in the same Tupperware, the same kind of Tupperware. And I was eating, and I thought, there's a lot of dressing on this lunch. Then I thought, it doesn't matter, you know. it's all going in the same place and I weighed and measured it. No, day one. I called up my sponsor and I said, oh, my husband's going to bring me my weighed and measured meal. I'm down in the village. We're going to go to some movie or other. She said, nobody can weigh and measure your food for you. And there was another spiritual awakening. All my life, I thought, if I could just find the right people, that I would be taken care of, or that somebody else is watching the store. Somebody else is taking care of the larger picture, because I really didn't know how to do it. And there it was. I'm the only one that can weigh and measure my food. Oh my God. So then I got this job. I never had a job in an office, and all the food is free. I mean, it's amazing what's free. And I thought, oh God, I'm never going to get through this. Turned out the personnel manager was on the GreySheet. And I remember sitting in the lunchroom at this job. I'm now 55 years old then. And I take out this container and I open it. And there was this beautiful lunch. It was gorgeous. It was green, and there was reds, and there was browns, and there was a little sprigs of yellow. And I'm just like, I'm doing it, I cried. But somebody made me this beautiful meal. Somebody made this for me. And I was just overwhelmed. What GreySheet has given me is the gift of self-care. It was totally unexpected. I'm very good at following rules. Ballerinas, you get on the bar, you do what they tell you. Go to the GreySheet, do what they tell you. But then over time, this wonderful kind of softness and safety. Thank you, 1 minute, has come over me. So I decided that some people thought that eating the lunch and the dinner was not a day one. Other people thought it was. And people said, just do what your sponsor tells you to do. And I sort of sat there and I thought, you know what, these mechanical mistakes are my Achilles heel. Other people may have other things, smells or, parties or any. So, for 3 years, I kept going back to day one. And so I've got 17 years now. My marriage of almost 40 years ended over a fight about lunch. Who would have thought? We've been through drug addiction, 2 world wars, segregation, race riots. We've been through everything. And it all came down to, he wanted to make me lunch. It was a perfectly nice, there was something about the GreySheet that unhinged the whole thing. There was something about, I think I'm going to say my public persona, which was also a very valuable part of my relationship. So I just found out that there's a vegetable that I can have, but I can't have the juice because we don't do juices, we don't do blenders. Well, there goes my whole menu. I keep it very simple. You can get everything you need at the salad bar in the local grocery store. You just have to weigh and measure it. And you have to read labels, reading labels. Now, I grew up in the 60s reading labels of, pesticides. That was the big thing. So 5th or less, just count the commas. And the main thing is the willingness. I opened a dairy product. And I thought, oh, this smells delicious. And I'm, making my breakfast. And I sit down, I take a big old spoonful of it. And I thought, this tastes so sweet. And I thought, wait a minute. The company had changed the labels. So it now looked exactly, the word plain was exactly the same as the one that had fruit in it. So I would suggest that we all see this as a great adventure. How am I going to stay? How am I going to cut school today? Jimmy? How am I going to get out of my house in my miniskirt and not get caught by my mother? How am I going to tell the cops a lie and get out of being arrested? How am I going to stand on a picket line and not get my head crushed in? Same thing. How am I going to stay abstinent today? Every one of us has everything we need to stay abstinent a day at a time. It's just the other perspective, not, oh, what am I losing? No one's taking anything from me, but it's a lot of fun. There's always a way to stay abstinent. And if you go to lots of meetings, you'll hear a lot of fun stories about how to do that. And don't worry about it too much. You know, your higher power is going to take care of you. If you don't pick up the sugar and the carbs, the phenomenon of craving will go away. I still suffer from anxiety and depression. I still say the wrong things at the right time. You know, I still get angry. And I laugh a lot in GreySheet because the whole thing is so stupid. I mean, why would I eat? I mean, is it really that important that I have this thing that's not on the GreySheet? Why? I mean, thank you. There's just no time left. So I'll close with that. And thank you all for keeping me abstinent today and giving me the privilege of telling my story, which will certainly keep me abstinent the rest of the day. Thank you.